in calcium chloride in the test as well?
I could, but since I gave you calcium chloride, I give you barium chloride, which is the same thing. 1, 2, 3. So remember, the only thing I would ever give you as far as actual problem would either be potassium or sodium chloride. So KCl, right? And sodium chloride. So this would be, each of these would be 2. This would be 3, just like calcium chloride. So those are the only 4 salts I would give you on an actual problem. Now, I do have a thought problem technically that I could include as the math portion because it's more of a conceptual math problem. And I may throw that at you as a surprise. So if you get it, great. If you don't get it, it'll be extra credit probably. So, but these would be the only 4, Joan. Yeah. Okay. All righty. So I think that takes care of all of them. Well, including this again, but anything else you guys want me to go over math-wise before we go into chapter 13? Because chapter 13 from a Zoom perspective is really easy, okay? There's a lot of stuff that I would want you guys to obviously watch and read and come back, and if there's any questions, ask me about them. But we really want to focus on the cardiac output, right? Like I said, chapter 13 deals with the cardiac output side of MAP regulation. And so I just want to make sure you guys understand the key difference between an autorhythmic action potential and a contractile action potential and how they each contribute to overall cardiac output. But any last minute thing on math problems before we proceed on the heart?
Can you go over number 4 really quick?
Number 4. Okay, so do number 4 again. Okay, yeah. So in this case, won't go it step by step, but the whole idea is we're solving for, again, X milligrams over 25 centiliters of water, 100 centiliters to 1 liter, 1,000 milligrams to 1 gram, 146 grams to 1 mole, decimolarity 10 decimals to 1 mole. So everything cancels out except for liters and decimals, 0.054 decimals per 1 liter. And so the final setup would just be X times 100 times 1 times 1. And I always do this, remember guys, 10 decimals because that unit hasn't canceled out. 25 times 1 times 1,000. Oh, always forget this. 1 liter because that unit hasn't canceled out yet. 146 times 1 is equal to 0.054 decimals per liter. And then of course you have to isolate the X. So X is equal to 0.054 decimals over 1 liter, just to be correct. And then everything down here gets multiplied. So 25, 1 liter, 1,000, 146, and 1. Liters cancel out. And then 100, 1, 10 decimals, and decimals cancel. So all you're doing is solving for X now, okay? So just a backwards problem, but the key thing always applies again, guys, unit cancellation, and then the proper values for the metric system units or the prefixes, okay? All righty. All right.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Going back to 10 and 11, you said that, or did you say earlier that there's going to be like a small range that we could input to Canvas?
Yeah.
Okay.
It takes into account, like I said, you cannot round at after every fraction mark, but for something like 10 and 11, yeah, if 11 is a continuation of 10, you know, because that's the whole idea, because again, if we go back down here, and if you solve for 10, it's 0.034. And so when you multiply this by 1,000 and times 3, technically this answer down here should be 102. But if you do the problem and only rounded the end, it's only 101. But when I type this up, the answer is 101 plus or minus, I think, 2 on either side. So it incorporates you rounding on part 10, but it doesn't include rounding after each fraction. So that's the key thing. You can only round at the end of your answer, and my range will include those kind of rounding aspects for these continuation like problems. Okay.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I did. So just want to clarify.
Yep. All righty. Okay, guys, I think that's good. If you have any other problems, like I said, if you haven't done these, try to do them, then get back to me. And we have to do Zooming at 5 p.m. again on Wednesday, or at 11 again tomorrow. It's not a big deal, okay? Because like I said, I got 2 weeks to go through chapters 13 and 14. 14 is very lengthy, but a lot of it is terminology that you guys just have to know. The actual stuff you need to understand is really simplified, if you want to call it, okay? And then so the math exam is this Saturday, the 24th. So and right now, as of the number of students who've gotten back to me, you're looking at 11 problems, 30 minutes. So I'm going to increase it by 4 minutes, okay? Unless you guys get back to me, and then but remember, you guys got to get back to me before like maybe Wednesday or Thursday, because I want to put the finishing touches on this puppy on Thursday, so I can send out an FAQ on Friday or Thursday night, so you guys all know what's coming at you. But it's going to be 11 problems, okay? No different. So that's why, please, if you are having any kind of timing issues, you got to at least give me an honest to God assessment. I'm not going to give you an hour to do 11 problems. That's way too much time, okay? But something reasonable right now. 30 minutes is, I guess, reasonable, because remember I told you, if I were to do this with a very nice writing, I mean, I read, like I said, I was pretending to read every line of my problem. Yes, granted, I know how to do these things, in my sleep, but I purposely read slow. I wrote really nice on a piece of paper. It took me 9 minutes and 51 seconds to do 11 questions. So if I do triple time, that's 30 minutes. Okay. So
what about 45 minutes, Arnold? Let's compromise. I mean, sorry, learning psychology, Well, just ask. If I ask, you may say yes. True. You're a good group. Probably your favorite.
Okay. So, but yeah, we'll. You guys just have to get back to me. So, Lenine is pushing for 45 minutes without doing it, Lenine, or did you do it in 45 minutes? That's the question.
Oh, it took me a while to do this practice exam. I was like,
I agree. 45. I second that.
I third that.
Okay, I will contemplate. Yeah, as Wendy goes 45 too. You guys are funny. So that's 11 questions. So 4 minutes per question. Yeah.
I teach you in nursing, you have to be assertive, right? So.
Yeah.
Arnold, we literally just took 30 minutes right now on just 1 through 4, and then 10 and 11. That's not taking into account.
But that's me explaining it. That's me with me talking. You know how long it takes me to talk and write at the same time.
You talk quite fast.
Not in this sense. I'm going slow today. I'm going slow. Don't have my whiskey in me yet. So, but anyway, okay. Let's see. I still got hands up. So, Jalissa, do you still have a question, Jalissa?
Yeah. So no STP or BMR problems, right?
No. You are going to get you're going to get a BMR problem on this Saturday. Yes. So, like I said, those 11 questions that I put up for either practice A, which I had to delete, but now practice B, you're going to get 11 questions. Pretty much the BMR is going to be exactly the same. And the only way I'm going to screw around with 1 through 4 or 10 and 11 is have you go from decimals to grams or milligrams to centimoles. All I'm going to do to change up the problem literally is change the molecule, right? That's what I can do, give you something else. And then it's just about what you're converting to and from. And that's where the metric system is important. You guys have to understand the metric system. So that's the only way I can change these problems is having you guys convert it from one prefix to another prefix. So, but as far as the BMR problem, those problems have to be sequential, literally. You're going to look at the STP, you're going to be looking at the surface area, calculating gross O2 consumed, calculating corrected gross O2 consumed, and then number 9 or whatever it is final BMR in the correct unit. So that is going to be a very stepwise process, okay? So yeah, from Michelle to everyone, know your conversion factors and know what variable you are. Yeah, there you go. Very straightforward. Thank you, Michelle. So very, very straightforward. So like I said, I will put up the problems that are stored on Canvas. Like I said, that were part of part A. There'll be no extra BMR problem, but I can put some more of those basic chemistry, going forward. And then of course, calculating for either the milligrams in this amount of solution or how much solution utilized or the final molecular weight. I'll give you those variations because those are still stored on Canvas because those questions are not sequential questions. So it won't be an official practice, but it'll just give you maybe another, I think 4 or 5 of those questions from part A that I had to delete, but I will put them back up in a simplified format. Okay. And then let's see, Ariam, go for it, Ariam.
Hi, Arnold. So it took me 42 minutes. I don't know. Is it because me reading too slow?
No, it's not. It's like I said, that's what I need to know. If it takes you 42 minutes, because like I said, if you guys were in class, the one thing that I've changed for lab exam number 1 is I put a definitive start time. Everybody would have, like, if they did the entire practical multiple choice in math, I capped it at an hour and a half basically, because you guys would all do the math problems in different variables, but sometimes you guys would be sitting in front of a multiple choice staring at it for like 20 minutes trying to figure out what it is. And I said, no, it's a waste of time. So, but yeah, if it took 42 minutes, okay. So 42 for Ariam, and I will take a note of that. And so we got 45, 42, I got an official 30. So I'll come up with something reasonable, okay? If you said it took 60 minutes, then I'd go, okay, you got to work a little faster, a little faster. So, okay. But I will give you guys my final decision. Like I said, probably I will send out an FAQ on Thursday and I'll say it'll be this many minutes. Okay. So 11 questions, this many minutes. So, or I may go up to, like I said, I'm thinking about putting a question 12, which is a thought question on there, which involves really no calculation. Just, can you think through a problem? And so because I'm putting a thinky problem up there, I may add in a couple of minutes so you actually get extra time to do the math, because you either get this thinky question or you don't. And because it's going to be a multiple choice question, even if you have to guess, at least you can click on something to guess what it is. So, but I will take that in consideration. So, okay. All right, everybody good then? Start chapter 13.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
So for the things you're posting, like for the practice A, so does it still have a problem like number 4 in practice B?
Yes, it will have a problem like that. Yes. So I'll give you all the chemistry. The only thing that won't be in the document or in the practice set that I'm putting up tonight, there will be no BMR problem, because that's a sequential one and that I have to think too much. So I only want to put simple stuff up there, which is basically all the chemistry stuff. So.
Okay. And
get some like 4 up there again. I'll make sure you get something like 4 up there.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And so the stuff on the practice B is the type of problems is going to be on the test. I mean, that's the only thing on test, right?
Yep. You're going to get 11 questions. Seriously, the way that again, because now we only have practice part B to look at, I'm setting up it exactly like this. Okay. So if you notice, question 1 and 2 are easy. Question 3 is going to be a molarity problem. Question 4 is going to be a backwards molarity problem. 5 through 9 will be BMR, and then 10 will be another molarity problem, because Y is going to be linked to 11, which is the osmolarity aspect of it. So technically 10 and 11 is just a rehash of like question number 3 with an additional step. So this is where, like I said, you practice it. I want you guys to get comfortable with the math, because like I said, if that dosage calculation class didn't scar some of my best students, this is where the basic math skills have to come into play. And no joke, even though the programs may have altered their passing requirements, but I remember when Josue, one of my students took Citrus's ADN program, like, golly, this is like close to like 8 years ago now since he graduated. But he told me, he failed he got 2 chances on this dosage calculation test, right? He failed the first time, missing 1 question. Okay. And that was when they made it, a pass was 100%, because obviously when it comes to drugs, you have to be spot on. If you overdose your patient, that's not good, right? Or even underdose them. So knowing the basic calculations is essential. And, and this is where, even when it comes to some of the more lenient programs out there, and Citrus has tapered it down. You don't have to get a perfect on it, but now you can only miss like maybe 2 questions and it's still considered a pass now. So you don't have to get 100%, you have to be like at 95%. And all the programs vary in their dosage calculation class, but that was that was when Josue came to me and said that. It's like, okay, because we're not talking hard math here, guys. It's really easy, but think about, not to put the spotlight on Lenine right now, but she sets it up properly, but she makes a minor, like I said, her fingers got in the way. Literally, that's what happened, and it, if she was like Josue, 8 years ago, that probably is what caused him to miss this one question. And now, think about the pressure now. Now this is your second time taking this test, and now you have to get perfect, or you either have to be remediated or you get kicked out of the program, right? And so the basic math skills are definitely important. And, again, no calculus level, just basic fractional math, guys. And this is the stuff you should be doing in your sleep. And again, if there's anything that I will tell to the guys in this class right now, if you want to impress your girlfriend or your wife, right? If you can calculate percentages off at a sale in your head without whipping out a calculator and tell your wife, oh yeah, that person's going to cost you $100, honey, just within 5 seconds, she's going to love you, because then she doesn't have to do the calculations on her own, because you're her walking human calculator. And, my wife finally admitted to that years ago, but I remember we were in this Coach outlet and she was totaling up these purses she wanted. And of course, it's like $300, right? For like 6 purses or whatever she wanted, because she found a bunch. And so of course she didn't believe me. So she had the guy calculate, oh yeah, okay, exact number is like 301. So I was off by $1, because, when you think about, here's a purse that's $150 and, 54 cents. Well, I don't even give a crap about the 54 cents. It's just, here's a $150 purse, do the 30% off, do the 40% off, boom. And, it's that kind of maths. And so, it's something you guys definitely should get used to, so to speak. Okay. All right. Chapter 13. Can I go to 13? I take that as a yay. Okay. So let me go ahead and bring up 13. This is 14, so ignore it. I was scaring my anatomy students just like I scared you guys last semester with 14. So, because we were starting the Renin pathway today in anatomy, which was fun. So 13, but I'll keep this up because, like I said, it is relevant to today's discussion, at least initially. And so when it comes to chapter 13, guys, 13 is really all about the heart. Okay, that's what it focuses on. And what we want to focus on, of course, are the 2 parameters that are going to basically be regulated by your nervous system. And so here's chapter 13. It's the heart. And when it comes to blood pressure regulation, oh, hold on. Okay, so can you see chapter 13 now?
Yeah.
Yes.
So when it comes to the heart, basically it's about 2 things you really already know about the heart. The first one is how fast does the heart pump, right? It's beats per minute. And so this is where we're going to be dealing with these autorhythmic cells. But then, and again, when you go back to anatomy, all of these should be pretty much familiar to you guys. But it's really the contractile cells that dictate, well, how strong do the ventricles, and really we only care about the left ventricle. How hard does that left ventricle contract to pump the blood to the rest of the body? And so when you combine the 2 aspects, so heart rate, and now this is what we call stroke volume, how much blood is ejected by that left ventricle, both of those parameters are now going to contribute to something called cardiac output. And so this is where we'll just jump ahead to the picture in chapter 14. So in this case, here's mean arterial pressure at the top, and this is where chapter 13 deals with pretty much this aspect on this side right here, and chapter 14 deals with this side down here, but they do cross over into each other's realm to some degree. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated, but for this level, I break it down really simplistically. And so what chapter 13 deals with is, okay, here's cardiac output. Again, it's very positive, meaning that if we want cardiac output to go up, something as simple If cardiac output goes up, it goes up. Why? Because both heart rate and stroke volume have gone up. And in this case, if we want the heart rate to go up, we have to make sure we decrease parasympathetic stimulation to the heart, but increase sympathetic. And by also increasing sympathetic, we also increase the contractility of those cardiac contractile muscle cells. And as we increase all these parameters, this would cause an overall increase in mean arterial pressure. And the detail, of course, for chapter 13 is, of course, ionic fluxes. So what ions are involved in altering heart rate, what ions are involved in altering stroke volume. And the neat thing about this, and this is where the trick is, when you look at how the autonomic nervous system regulates both heart rate and stroke volume, both of them affect heart rate, but there is no parasympathetic input to the stroke volume. So the contractility, i.e. how strong your ventricles contract, is all due to the amount of sympathetic input going in. But this is where venous return brings in stuff from the right side into the equation. So this is where we have to tackle some of chapter 13 stuff by itself, leave some of this stuff by itself, go to 14, and then circle back, okay? Because like I said, this is where regulating mean arterial pressure is very integrative, okay? And the whole idea is to maintain a homeostatic level of blood pressure. Now, the only problem here is when you're exercising per se, okay? Exercising, you guys already know that your heart rate goes up. You know your heart is contracting stronger. Cardiac output goes up. And so your mean arterial pressure could theoretically blow through the roof. And the only reason we don't blow up is because at the same time, we're going to cause a decrease of mean arterial pressure on this side. And in this case, even though 14 is very lengthy, the whole idea now is it's all about this topic called TPR, total peripheral resistance. But succinctly said, TPR just deals with one aspect. Are your blood vessels going to vasodilate or vasoconstrict? And so if we cause a decrease in TPR because of an increase in arterial radius, blood viscosity is really not physiologically regulated. Okay, to some degree it can be, but not really. But in this case, when you're exercising, true or false, are your skeletal muscles in need of more oxygen now?
Yes.
Yeah. And so if you want to get more oxygenated blood to your muscles, you're obviously going to have to increase arteriolar radius, meaning you have to vasodilate. And by vasodilating all your arteries to your exercising skeletal muscles, you're going to cause a decrease in TPR. And this is where we have a nice balancing act. The only reason our cardiovascular system doesn't explode when we're exercising is because even though our mean arterial pressure is going up on the left side because of the heart activity, on the right side, it's being brought down because of this massive vasodilation. So that's why your mean arterial pressure should never climb up very high when you are exercising. It'll get slightly elevated, but you should never have a BP of like 250 when you're exercising, because that would not be good, okay? But it's a total compensatory mechanism when it comes to regulating mean arterial pressure. And again, it's linked to metabolism, okay? Alyssa, go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah, can you repeat what you said about contractility on the left side?
Yeah, so in this case, the stroke volume deals with, again, how strong those contractile muscle cells, cardiac muscle cells are actually contracting. So if you think about me squeezing my hand, if I just go, right, weak contraction, I'm not going to eject a lot of blood. But if I do this, I'm going to eject more blood out of that ventricle. And so this is where I come up with, again, whenever I talk cardiovascular phys, it's almost better to talk about it during fall semester because we can utilize Thanksgiving as a reference. But if you've ever, did a traditional turkey in the oven, well, you're going to baste your turkey, right? And so you fill up your turkey baster bulb with the juices. And if you only squeeze the bulb a little bit, only a little bit of juice comes out. If you squeeze it fully, more juice comes out and you fully baste your turkey. So depending on how strong those contractile cells contract, either strong or weak, will determine eventually how much blood is ejected out of that left ventricle. And the amount of blood ejected out that left ventricle is referred to as the stroke volume here. Okay? Okay. I take it's okay, Alyssa, right? But that's what it is. Okay, guys?
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. And so what we really want to focus on is, of course, everything on the left-hand side. And so this is where chapter 13 comes into play. And really when it summarizes it, first of all, the big change that I've changed for the autorhythmic cells, and so this is what actually sets the pace of the heart, is I don't care about slow phase 1 or slow phase 2, okay? I don't care about this. Basically, we're going to break down each of these phases into basically just the slow depolarization phase. Doesn't matter, we don't care phase 1 or 2, fast dipole, fast repole. And what I've done here, or in this picture, this is done straight from the textbook, but it just shows you that each of these phases are due primarily to certain ion channels. And so we go down into, again, my drawing right here, we always have to look at the normal aspect. But in this case, if we label each of these phases as just simply phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, what you have to realize is between normal versus an increase in sympathetic versus an increase in parasympathetic, do phases 2 and 3 change between these three scenarios? Or are they all the same, 2 and 3?
They're the same.
And really the only thing that changes is phase 1 for each of these phases, okay? And this is where, and in this case, even though I've strictly said an increase in sympathetic input or increase in parasympathetic input, remember the whole idea, it's a tug of war between these two branches of the nervous system. So guess what? We can get this result by not only increasing sympathetic input to the SA node, we can get this result by decreasing the parasympathetic input to that SA node as well. So it's just like what I emphasized with you guys on midterm number 1, right? If we were to take a resting membrane potential and we were to look at, just the classic, oh, it's nice and stable, but then does this, right? Because we have now applied drug A at this point in time, right? So time is on the x-axis. The whole idea is, what do you think this drug is doing to cause this cell to depolarize? It's obviously what? Increasing what?
Permeability.
Permeability of what though?
Sodium.
Of sodium. But could it also be decreasing the permeability of potassium as well?
Yes.
Yeah, and so this is where, when you start thinking about it, whether you increase or decrease the permeability or the inputs, you can get the same kind of results. Granted, if you were to reduce all of the parasympathetic input to the SA node, you wouldn't have the fastest heart rate because it does take a little bit of epinephrine kicker to get your heart rate up to, 180 or 190, but you can actually cause your heart rate to go up by decreasing the parasympathetic input. And of course, on your last exam, what was the drug that served as a parasympathetic antagonist to cause your heart rate to go up?
Atropine?
Atropine, yeah, atropine, right? So atropine is a cardiac stimulant, but it doesn't do it by mimicking the sympathetic. It does it by blocking the parasympathetic, okay? And so that's the whole idea, just to reinforce it. And so when it comes to each of these channels, basically all we care about is what's happening during phase 1. And phase 1, basically we have the contributions of a calcium T-type channel, a sodium funny channel, and a generic potassium channel. And of course, the whole idea is if we look at the normal heart rate here, we're just saying that there's a normal balance between calcium and sodium influx and potassium efflux, and we get this normal heart rhythm. But now, if we look at under sympathetic input, right, to cause this depolarization to occur faster, what would we have to do? And I'm not going to put all this extra stuff here. What would we have to do to the permeabilities of each of these ions to cause an increase in heart rate? We would have to do what with calcium? We would have to
Increase.
Increase. How about sodium?
Increase.
Increase. How about potassium?
Decrease.
Decrease, yeah. So we have more potassium coming in, more calcium and sodium coming in and less potassium leaving. We will depolarize much faster, and that's exactly what happens to increase our heart rate. So when we start dumping, again, norepinephrine and epinephrine on the SA node, we're going to basically open up channels, in this case, calcium and sodium, but at the same time closing potassium channels, okay? And then on the exact flip-flop side, if we now want to go into parasympathetic activity, if we want this heart rate to slow down, what would we have to do to calcium and sodium versus potassium now? Both calcium and sodium would have to
go down,
and potassium would have to
go up.
And basically, does this sound sort of something like you learned way back in
anatomy
1 stuff, right? When it comes to permeability, right? If you want to depolarize something, you have to allow more sodium, or even if you think about synaptic transmission, does the influx of calcium cause that neuron to release neurotransmitter?
Yes.
Right? And if we want to hyperpolarize a membrane, is it really almost exclusively due to potassium?
Yes.
Yes. And so this is why I really tried to harp on you guys the importance of lecture exam 1 stuff, because it's totally applicable to cardiovascular physiology. Okay. And this is literally how your heart rate is modulated by your brain. Remember, your cardiac muscle cells are myogenic, meaning that this SA node is firing at a consistent rate, whether it's attached to your body, or if I were to come over to any of your houses, cut out your heart and throw it into balanced saline, would your heart still beat?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And only because it's connected to your nervous system, depending upon what you are experiencing, right? Whether there's an increase or decrease in either sympathetic or parasympathetic input to the heart, that input will now alter that heart rate to either go up or to go down. And of course, when it comes to normal activity, you get excited about something. So you just won the lottery, right? I think if any of us won the lottery, would your heart rate go up dramatically?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It would. And again, theoretically, it would be bad for you, because theoretically you could have a heart attack or a stroke because you won the lottery, right? Versus the flip side, if you think about winding down for the night, you're ready to go to bed, metabolism is lower. That's why your parasympathetic input to your heart is going to cause your heart rate to slow down, and hopefully you can get a good night's sleep. But this is literally how your heart rate is controlled. It's and again, don't worry, the details will come at the end of the chapter. But this is the initial introduction to it, and it's all based upon just simple permeability changes of the membrane, guys. Okay, so any questions on this? All right, like I said, pretty basic. If you got through the video, it's pretty much everything I stated. I just want to make sure you guys are totally clear on it. Okay, and so with that in mind, as far as the next couple of PowerPoints, the only thing that we really care about for these is really how it's flowing. And so the whole idea, as long as it goes from the SA node to AV node to the bundle of His to the Purkinje fibers. I actually left out the right and left bundle branches because for some weird reason, some physiology books don't include the bundle branches, even though they are autorhythmic portions of the heart. Okay. And so when I first made my notes, I sort of stuck true to the book that I was requiring you guys to utilize. And so this first book that I utilized failed to mention the right and left bundle branches, but you guys know I covered those in the anatomy course, okay? And so the typical picture that you guys should have remembered from anatomy is if we draw a very basic 4-chambered heart. And again, if we put the SA node here, the AV node here, the bundle of His, the bundle branches, and then now the Purkinje fibers coming up here, the whole idea is as the SA node initiates this wave of electrical activity, it basically spreads throughout the atrias from top to bottom, including to the left-hand side. But the thing you have to realize is that the walls between the atrias and the ventricles are electrically impermeable. And so once the signals get to the bottom of the atrias, it stops. And the only way for this electrical signal to get conveyed into the ventricles is through the AV node, the bundle of His, the bundle branches. But the thing is, the interventricular septum also now prevents this electrical signal from stimulating the ventricles from top to bottom. The electrical signal has to go all the way to the bottom of the heart, and then it's allowed to stimulate the heart from a bottom to top perspective. And if you guys remember, when it comes to all of the valves of the heart, right? Whether it's the tricuspid or bicuspid or the aortic or pulmonary valve, all 4 valves are located at the top of the ventricles. And so in this case, the atrioventricular valves allow the bloods to flow from the atrias into the ventricles. But then when the ventricles contract from a bottom to top perspective, they're ejecting blood out the respective pulmonary and aortic valves into the pulmonary arteries and aorta respectively. So this is one reason why the heart has to be stimulated, in this case, the ventricles from bottom to top. And it's accomplished because all of the electrical activity is shunted in the right direction. And hopefully you guys remember that from anatomy. Do you guys remember that from anatomy?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so hopefully it should sound familiar. And if Lenine says it sounds familiar, then it better sound familiar to the rest of you guys because Lenine wasn't even my anatomy student.
Yeah, so. I didn't have you.
So if Lenine knows it, everybody else better know it, so to speak. All right. And that's really all it is, guys. It's very basic with regards to electrical pathway. And of course, when it comes to the things that can go wrong, again, ectopic foci. So these are defects in autorhythmicity. Again, remember this: SA node, AV node, bundle of His cells, Purkinje fiber cells, they all are myogenic. It's just that they have different degrees of myogenicity. And this is why the SA node controls everything. But it doesn't mean that other parts of your heart can't transiently have higher activity. And so when it comes to these ectopic foci, just FYI, SA node typically fires between 60 to 90 events per minute, your normal heart rate. Purkinje fibers are down in the 30 to low 40s, okay, 30 to 45 typically. But it doesn't mean that those Purkinje fibers can't suddenly get up to maybe 100 or 150 or 200 if something short circuits them. And so this is why defects in autorhythmicity can definitely get in the way of signaling the rest of the heart to contract in unison. Okay, and we'll talk about that after we cover the contractile cells. But if you guys remember the analogy in anatomy, is the reason why the SA node controls the rest of the heart rate is because it fires the fastest. And the analogy was, if I bring up my peeps that I have on my screen here, if I was the SA node and let's say I like to run at 10 miles per hour, Mark, Lenine, Renuka, and and Zach are the remainder cells. So Mark's the AV node, Lenine's the bundle of His, Renuka's the bundle branches, and Zach's the Purkinje fibers. And Zach only likes to run at 3 miles per hour. But because we are all connected together by a rope and all of your cardiac muscle cells, are they all connected by intercalated discs?
Yes.
Yes.
And all of these intercalated discs possess gap junctions?
Yes. And anchoring junctions.
So all of these cardiac muscle cells are connected electrically to one another. And so in the analogy that I gave you guys in anatomy is, again, if we are all connected by a rope, even though Zach only wants to run at 3 miles per hour, because we're all connected by a rope, if I run at 10, does Zach have to run at 10 miles per hour?
Yes, I do.
He has to, right? But if now there's something that prevents that signal from going from cell to cell, so in this case, let's say we cut the rope between Mark and Lenine. Mark and myself would run at 10 miles per hour, but Lenine, Renuka, and Zach would now run at a much slower rate because they don't run as fast as I do. And this is where you can have defects in autorhythmicity, and this is where heart block can come into play. And so if we actually have damage to the connectivity between any of these cells, this is where we can go into arrhythmias where the ventricles contract at a slower rate. Remember this, right? Typical hand. Atrias, ventricles contract and fill synchronously with one another. But what happens if we get something like this? Right? Because this contracts faster and this contracts slower, then theoretically, if they were to do this, could we have blood trying to go in two directions at once? And would that lead to inefficient pumping of blood to the rest of the body?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to link this to the stroke volume aspect, because if your atrias and ventricles are ever out of sync, that's where the efficiency or the amount of blood actually leaving the heart's going to be compromised. And of course, if you don't deliver enough oxygenated blood to your tissues, including your brain, that's where you go south, so to speak. Okay. But with that in mind, any initial questions on the autorhythmic cells of the heart? Okay, now we go into the other one, which is actually the favorite one, because it does introduce my favorite one or rule here. So before I get to it, who here, because I already got some emails over the spring break, who here can properly define Frank Starling's law of the heart?
Oh, all blood that goes into the heart comes out. But
yeah, whatever goes in,
that goes back comes back to the heart.
Yeah, so in this case, it's about what goes, basically the whole idea is it's in a very specific order. What goes into the heart is what comes out, but what goes out doesn't always come back, okay? And so that's Frank Starling's law of the heart comes into play. And this is where those contractile cells will come into play as well. So when it comes to the rest of the cardiac muscle cells, and this is where I always brought this up in anatomy, right? We always think that this cardiac muscle is involuntary, because it is. But if I were to go into any of our hearts and selectively destroyed the SA node, the AV node, the bundle of His, the bundle branches, and Purkinje fibers, would your heart stop beating now?
Yes.
Yes, it would, yeah. And so it's really sort of a misnomer because only 1% of your cardiac muscle cells are what we call autorhythmic. The rest of them fall into this contractile category. And the contractile muscle AP looks totally different from the autorhythmic one. And again, it's on the next slide. So this is, again, typical textbook picture. And so we have a not stable baseline right here, slightly more negative than a neuron. But the whole idea is sharp dipole, a plateau phase, and then repolarization. But of course, to put into the context of metabolism, oh, I don't have it in here. I thought I did. Oh, I guess I'm going to have to add something. Never mind. Yep, I thought I had it in here, but I didn't. So the picture that's missing here, but it should be in the video, and tell me if you guys, if you saw this, right? The video should have a picture that looks like this. So we're going to look at, again, something like this, but then actually, how do I want to do this? No, we'll do it. No, actually, you know what? We're going to do it this way. We're going to do something like this, something like this, and something like this. Okay, and so of course, these are the action potentials for a cardiac contractile cell, and we divide them up into phase 1, 2, and 3, just like in those autorhythmic cells. Are 2 of these 3 phases the same in all 3 pictures?
1
and 3, yeah. So 1 and 3 don't change. Only phase 2 is affected by the sympathetic branch. So remember, the contractile cells contribute to what we call stroke volume. So it actually determines how strong those ventricles contract. And remember from the overall diagram that's in chapter 14, basically these cells are only going to be altered by sympathetic input. There's no parasympathetic input to your ventricles, okay? And that's in the, I'll highlight them in my PowerPoints again for you guys. And so in this case, phase 1 and phase 3, again, phase 1 is just due to sodium, phase 3 is due to potassium. So increase and increase cause the appropriate dipole and repolarization. But phase 2 is now due to calcium permeability through what we call L-type calcium channels. And again, when you go back to the autorhythmic ones, or even the nomenclature, the funny story goes, of course, is the following. Calcium channels were basically the focal point of my life in graduate school. And so the first paper that my principal investigator gave me to read was on the classification of of calcium channels. And basically back in the early 90s, we basically had discovered 3 types of calcium channels, the so-called T-type and L-type, which are part of chapter 13. And of course, T stood for tiny and transient, and L stood for large and long lasting. And the reason why they use these words tiny and large and long lasting was they actually described how much calcium came through these channels when these channels open. So the amount of calcium coming in through these T-type channels was transient and trickling. I actually like the word trickling because, right, depending upon how fast or slow it does, this calcium is literally trickling into the cell, reaches threshold, then you get this boom, you get this autorhythmic AP. On the flip side, if you notice this L-type calcium channel for this contractile cell, can we make phase 2 really, really long or really, really short, right? And so we can actually lengthen it. And guess what? This lengthened plateau phase is all due to calcium coming in. And of course, in the video, I probably mentioned N-type calcium channels. And why did that garner a chuckle from me when I first read this paper 30 years ago? What does the N, do you guys remember what N stood for?
Neither long nor T.
Yeah.
Neither L or T.
Yeah, neither T or L, thank you. So basically it fell in the middle. And that was really my focal point. And then during my graduate career, we came up with P, Q, and R. So there's a hell of a lot of different calcium channels in different parts of your nervous system. But in this case, yeah, that's all that's happening here. So in this case, when it comes to this calcium coming through these L-type channels in each of these 3 phases now, again, let's use this as the baseline. So consider this as normal. But if we want to lengthen this plateau phase, have we now increased or decreased the calcium coming into this cardiac muscle cell?
Increase.
Increase. And if we want to shorten the plateau phase, we have just what?
Decrease.
Decrease. Oh, and guess what? If we increase sympathetic input, right, because it's only due to the sympathetic branch, which of these two pictures, the one on the far left or far right, now represents an increase in sympathetic input to the heart?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so this picture here or this picture here, because this is normal. Which of these two pictures, the left or the right, so does this one represent an increase in sympathetic input or a decrease in sympathetic input?
Increase.
Yeah, so an increase in sympathetic input will now cause an increase in calcium influx, leading to a stronger contraction, and now a decrease in sympathetic input will now cause a decrease in calcium permeability, leading to a contractility like this, right? So this is the reason why I always use my hands here. The one on the far left, that's what's happening on the left-hand side. What's happening in the middle is something like this. And then what's happening on the far right is like this, something relatively weak. And again, it's all meant to adjust, of course, the overall cardiac output of the heart based upon your current metabolism. And of course, the one that you guys can notice every day is, a lot of us, can feel when our pulse goes up, if we're excited about something or get startled by something. But, if you really want to do this, take your pulse rate while you're sitting, in a Zoom meeting. And then when you're laying in bed, after you've been laying in bed for maybe about 10 minutes, take your pulse again. If you don't have, your iWatch or your Fitbit on or whatever, you can actually see how much your heart rate can go down if you actually go into this very relaxated condition. And of course, this is where meditation comes into play, because if you can actually learn how to breathe properly and meditate, can you naturally start altering your heart rate if you want to?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is where hypertension comes into play, guys, because one of the biggest things is, as I mentioned it with my anatomy class today, and I'll mention it to you guys already, but should you be aware the two types of hypertension, meaning what is the difference between primary and secondary hypertension?
Yes.
If you guys have already done those questions on your homework questions. Does anybody know, if you remember?
Secondary would be caused by disease like diabetes.
Caused by disease, and primary is caused by what?
Stress.
Stress, yes. And when it comes to hypertension, what form, primary or secondary, is the most predominant form in society right now?
Primary.
Primary.
If you look at, again, this may be dated, but I don't think it is, because it was in my original physiology book, 20 years ago. But yeah, 90% of all hypertension cases are classified as primary. It's not due to any kind of pathology. It's just all of us are just too wound up and too stressed out. And that's why when it comes to learning how to meditate or learning how to wind down for the day, and again, the funniest thing that I ever witnessed is, again, it was probably close to maybe 12 or 15 years ago, but Costco, in their normal monthly flyer, whatever it is, advertised a breathing machine to help lower your blood pressure naturally. And so guess what this machine did? It just taught you how to breathe. And so it costs like $200. So you're paying $200 to learn how to breathe, right? But the thing is, if you've done any kind of meditation literally just means to breathe in a very controlled but deep, slow manner. And when I was before my Fitbit became ancient, there was this little relaxation button on my Fitbit that basically told you to breathe in rhythm to this radiating circle. And then slowly exhale. And guess what? If I ever felt my heart rate was too high before I went to bed, I just hit that button, stared at this stupid little circle, breathe slow. And my heart rate dropped like that by 10 beats per minute just by slowing down and really thinking about how to breathe. And I think that's one of the key things about blood pressure. Even though physiology deals with homeostasis, even though our bodies are meant to maintain homeostasis, it really shows you that there is a big defect in blood pressure regulation when it comes to allowing extraneous environmental conditions to alter it. And I think that's one of the biggest defects from a organismal design that I can ever say about human beings. One is maybe, our penchant for storing fat. I mean, that's something that has not caught up to us evolutionary wise, meaning, you eat a lot of food, you're going to get fat. There's no way to homeostatically maintain fat or fat cells because we're just geared to, save it for a rainy day. But when you compare other physiological mechanisms, like, think about this. diabetes, right? Blood glucose regulation and diabetes isn't as rampant as blood pressure. And by the way, when it comes to diabetes, we know what's wrong with the human body up until our diet has really gone to shit within the past 10 or 15 years, guys. But, when it comes to, blood glucose regulation, yeah, as long as you don't have diabetes, whether you eat or don't eat, if you have good glucose regulation, your body will regulate insulin and glucagon release to maintain a homeostatic level of glucose. But for some reason, when we let these environmental stressors really play havoc with our brain, and that's pretty much what's causing it, this is where hypertension, should be controllable, but it really isn't. And so it's really sad when you think about, here's 90% of all hypertension cases due to stress. And because it's due to stress, they still have to now prescribe medication to drop the BP down, which is really amazing. So even though we should be regulating it, it's probably one of the most poorly regulated systems in the human body, just because of the number of people suffering from hypertension versus maybe the number of people suffering from something like diabetes, okay? Because endocrine, different regulation versus, nervous system regulation of blood pressure, which is really sort of a sad testament to the environment that we're living in. And the only reason I want to bring this up is, please forgive me if I did not check my email every day, but you know what happened during my spring break? I had to take my mom to the ER.
Is she okay?
Oh, she's fine. Okay. But what panicked me was, it was sort of amazing. I think most of you guys know this, but my father passed away in December. And I would say that over the past couple of months, my mom's blood pressure has been steadily going up. So her medication hasn't changed, but obviously, death of a loved one can play havoc with the nervous system. And so, it was going up. We saw our primary care physician like literally 2 weeks ago. So he upped her current meds a little bit, right? Because she was on the lowest dose of one of her BP medications. And so he just upped it to 10 milligrams. And it stabilized, but it really didn't come down. So it was still a little bit elevated, but it hadn't, it was only 2 weeks, so we're giving it time. And then, of course, this last Tuesday night, my mom complains of blurry vision. So she tries to, she's trying to take her own blood pressure when I walk into her from the library. And so I hook her up to the machine. We're getting a bunch of errors. And then we go through the blood pressure cuff. First reading, I'm not joking, guys, 193/104. 15 minutes later, telling my mom to relax a little bit. Next reading, get this, 210/104.
Oh my gosh, Arnold.
I told my mom, let's pack your bag. Let's go to the ER. And of course, we went to the ER. By the time we got to the ER, her systolic had now climbed to 225. Okay. I'm panicking a little bit, because like I said, when you look at the different stages of hypertension, 150s is still manageable, but seriously, when it climbs above 200, that's when you really start to worry about it. So we got the whole stroke trauma, treatment, but it was really funny because when the nurse did all the appropriate stroke, if you want to call it diagnostics, mom had no symptoms. They asked her to walk from one side of the room to the other, and they were actually trying to hold her up. And she was literally zipping back and forth across the room. And so there's no indication of stroke. It's just her BP is really elevated. Got a CT scan, came out negative. And the worst thing was they had a backlog. So she couldn't get her MRI for 2 days. So she was in the hospital until Friday, which was a pain in the butt because of the stupid MRI. But literally her blood pressure was just elevated due to literally nothing pathological. See, that's the whole reason why this chapter is something that I really love to talk about, love and hate relationship, because it's happening to my mom right now. But my mom's a perfect example of primary hypertension because all the tests came out negative, blood negative, nothing wrong with her from a blood panel point of view, nothing wrong, at least from an imagery point of view, you know what I mean? And her blood pressure got sky high. And of course they had to give her extra meds. So her primary care physician is now going to be updated, right? But the ER physician basically put her on 2 different meds, and these 2 meds have stabilized her. But the question is, what happened to my mom neurologically? Because that's what I have to set up next. I have to set up an appointment with the neurologist, because from an imagery point of view, nothing wrong. There's no damaged structures to lead to, let's say, maybe an increase in norepinephrine, right? or epinephrine released to cause maybe, stress-related hypertension. Structurally, nothing's wrong with her, but there's definitely something wrong with her because why? If she's not on these 2 meds, we're looking at, they gave her, I can't remember what they gave her on Tuesday night, but within an hour of giving this drug IV, blood pressure came down to, let's say, 175. It was still high, right? But, they were trying to get it down and just playing with different medications, and they released her with finally a systolic below 145. So that's where she was able to come home. And we've been monitoring it pretty well for the past couple of days. And, it's gotten as low as her diastolic has been great. Systolic has gone as low as 107. But, so we're playing around with the meds because the doctor did tell me if her systolic drops below 120, she's taking this one medicine 3 times a day. So that for the past 2 days, we've skipped the lunchtime dosage, giving her the morning and afternoon or morning and evening one. And her BP's been stable between 120 and 140, her systolic. But, it's really amazing when you start thinking about, what is going on with my mom's nervous system or even her endocrine system to cause it to go sky high compared to maybe a month ago or 2 months ago. So when it comes to that environmental stress of maybe losing my dad, how is it affecting my mom neurologically? And we are finally seeing it a couple months after his passing. But it did give me a scare because, all the imagery said, well, mom's fine. It's like, okay, then what the hell's happening, right? And it's something that I'm going to have to dig down and see maybe levels of neurotransmitter, levels of hormones, but the blood panels came out normal, and I don't know what kind of blood panels they actually did, but obviously they ran the full spectrum. But of course, give her meds. It's like, okay, it's the nature of the game today. Give her meds, see if it comes down. Okay, we don't care what caused it. We just give her the meds and she's stabilized. So it's really one of those weird things when it comes to blood pressure regulation. So, but anyway, when it comes down to going back to the topic, autoarrhythmic cells, contractile cells in front of you guys, at least at this level, any questions on what causes the cardiac output to go up or the cardiac output to go down?
Arnold?
Yeah, go for it, Ariam.
If the primary is main stress and most people get hypertension by primary issue, why is there cancellation stress hormone?
Okay, your main stress hormone metabolically is cortisol. And right now, the whole idea is, what does cortisol actually do? A lot of vasoconstriction effects on the body, but it's something that I don't know specifically too much about cortisol because that doesn't affect everybody. A lot of it has to do with really the nervous system. Your nervous system is just firing at a slightly higher rate to cause more vasoconstriction or to cause your heart to beat faster or beat stronger when it shouldn't be. And those are the primary reasons, but there's no pathology that's causing it. It's just something is affecting. It's, again, if you go back to really when you think of the sympathetic nervous system, I think all of you guys have heard of fight or flight, right? Fight or flight response. And, and that's what's causing it. You have this low level amount of stress that really you cannot sense, but it is causing your heart to contract slightly stronger, your heart to maybe contract 5 or 10 beats higher. So, in this case, if somebody goes up from, let's say, 70 to 80 beats per minute, combined with some vasoconstriction of your arterioles, could get your blood pressure up into the 150s or 160s without you even knowing it, because unless your heart's really sort of beating strong, most of us, the only time we can actually hear our heart beat is when we're laying in bed ready to go to sleep, right? But on a regular basis, most of us don't notice if our heart rate has gone up by, let's say, 70 to 80, and we really can't tell whether your heart has increased the stroke volume by maybe 10%, but all of those contributing factors combined with some systemic vasoconstriction of your blood vessels can definitely lead to an elevated BP. But it's, something we really don't perceive. I mean, the weirdest thing for me is, and I told you guys this story in anatomy, but one of my former students, Norman, many years ago, but when we did the cardiovascular lab on campus, his resting BP was 165 over 100. And he's only 20, he's in his mid 20s. And I, nonchalantly asked him. So this was fairly early in my teaching career. It's like I said, maybe 15 years ago. But I asked him, are you being, looked at for hypertension? And he sort of blew me off because, even back then I viewed hypertension as a long-term chronic illness, which it mainly is. But the surreal thing that I think I told you guys last semester, or whenever you took anatomy, was 2 weeks after we did the cardiovascular lab, Norman died of a heart attack. So this was the one student that I actually lost in my class. And I got told by another student, but yeah, he literally suffered a heart attack on his 27th birthday, which was very disheartening because it's something that should have been prevented, could have been prevented. But, sometimes, this is why it's called the silent killer, because you really can't sense if your BP is that high unless you have other symptomologies. Like with my mom, the only reason she was taking her blood pressure last Tuesday was because her vision became blurry. You know what I mean? And so that's where you think, oh, could it be a stroke now because of the hypertension? And so usually if there's no secondary symptomology, you could be walking around with 180 over 100 and not even know it. And I think that's what's same thing with diabetes. I think I told you guys in anatomy, most people with undiagnosed type 2 diabetes only know that they have diabetes when they wake up blind one morning because all the blood vessels in their retina have burst. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of diseases that are like that. And this is the one reason why, even if you are healthy, have a BP monitor at home and at least take your blood pressure maybe once a week or at least once a month. If you're healthy, once a month, just to see if there's anything abnormal, you know what I mean? And it's just maybe just to play it on the safe side when it comes to some of these diseases that are out there or illnesses that we suffer from as human beings. So, but that's about it, Ariam. So, but anyway. Tiffany?
Yes. So when you said that one of your students passed away because he was tested for the TB, was that it? That was in lab, right?
That was in the lab, yeah. So this was in my physiology lab, many years ago. Yeah, no, this was phys lab. So if we were on campus, we'd be doing an EKG blood pressure lab. So you guys would all learn how to take traditional blood pressure without an automated machine, right? So we go old school.
Wow, missing out.
So it's old school, we take for granted technology, but if there's no power, this is where you get a good old sphygmomanometer and a stethoscope and learn how to. I think when it comes to traditional blood pressure measurements, it's actually hearing the sounds associated with measuring blood pressure, which I still find interesting, because the physics behind the blood pressure sounds are interesting. Even though it's old school, I still find it quite interesting. And so we would do a combined blood pressure where you guys would take blood pressures on each other just to get a baseline, because after Norman died on me, I want to make sure none of you guys are going to die on me, basically. Okay, you guys got to live at least a couple of years longer than I do, right? But we also go through EKGs. And so it's really interesting when I know I have a student who has maybe an arrhythmia or a PVC, so premature ventricular contractions, and our rudimentary EKG setup in labs can actually see it, which is really cool, and that's what we're missing out in COVID.
It's so sad.
Yeah, it is.
What else are we missing besides doing
Well, we're missing EKG. The most important ones that we're missing are really the EKG lab. I think it's always interesting, as well as the spirometry lab. So, if any of you guys suffer from asthma or emphysema or any other kind of chronic lung disease, we actually can do spirometry exams on each of you. We usually basically divide up and have a guinea pig, and then everybody can get their own spirometry reading if they want to. I don't force everybody to do it. If they just want to watch somebody go through a spirometry measurement, you can do it, but the machines are there for you guys to determine your own breathing, if you want to call it norms. So those are the two labs that I miss doing the most, along with the RAT lab, which is more old school stuff. But it's really the EKG blood pressure and the EKG blood pressure spirometry, and in fact, my favorite lab is still the urinalysis lab. So understanding how your kidneys get rid of extra volume or maintain proper blood osmolality is always one of my favorite ones, because you guys have to go to the bathroom every 30 minutes and get a sample, but it shows you how your body can restore homeostasis within a couple of hours if we basically make your blood too dilute by drinking pure water or too salty by drinking tomato juice. So it's affectionately called the tomato juice lab. So those are the three labs that I really miss not being able to do with you guys, because your reactions are sometimes priceless when you go through the experiments, and you know, especially when your blood pressure is high. That's where I harp on you to go get checked out. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, all right. So if we go back now and regress back to the actual notes, this is where I can start highlighting stuff for you guys to finish off today's session. But it's basically just some extra detail to go along with the pictures I just showed you. But if we go back to, let's see, so yeah, right here. And so this is where we left off. And so this is where in lab, I would go through a little bit more detail about the EKG or electrocardiogram, because there's always a fun story to tell you guys about that. But the whole idea is when you actually look at the EKG, basically it's a simple 3-wave setup. And so when we actually record the electrical activity from the heart, a basic EKG looks like this, where you have these basically definitive changes in the electrical state of the cardiac muscle cells. And so the P wave is this first little bump right here. The QRS complex is this spike, and the T wave is this bigger bump here. And they all represent different electrical activities within the heart. And so the P wave represents atrial depolarization leading to atrial contractions, because the atria's got to pump blood into the ventricles, followed by the ventricular depolarization, again leading to ventricular contraction, and finally ventricular repolarization, leading to ventricular relaxation. And of course, we have 2 dipoles and 1 repole. Where's atrial repolarization? It's basically occurring at the same time as ventricular dipole. And because the ventricle is a much more massive chamber, the electrical activity of the ventricle depolarization masks out, or basically obliterates us being able to see the atrial repolarization, okay? And again, these are the finite details, which I never test you guys on, so don't worry about any of this stuff here. So if you want to cross this out, you can cross it out. I never test on that anymore. But when it comes to basic terminology, this is where the next page has a bunch of them. And so for you guys, definitely, this is sort of a no-brainer. 50-50 shot. You're either going to get tachycardia or bradycardia on your exam. It's like been on every second exam for the past 23 years. I don't think I've ever not had a test that had the words tachy or bradycardia on it. And then every now and then I'll either throw in the extrasystole due to those ectopic foci that we talked about in the autorhythmic portions, or the differences between flutter and fibrillation, okay? The difference here is regular sequences versus irregular depolarizations, if you want to link a keyword here, okay? But the one thing that did bring up, and so this is where everybody who attends Wednesday or Thursday's Zoom meeting can earn now extra credit, okay? Because the extra credit is this question. So why are all the deflections in the same directions on an EKG, whether it's a dipole or repolarization? And so we go back to that generic EKG tracing. All of these events occur in the upward traditional depolarizing direction, but these two represent dipole events. This one represents repole, and the question, of course, is why is that? FYI, Eslendi already has emailed me the correct answer. And so the question that I would pose to Eslendi right now is, do you actually understand what your email means to me or to you?
Yeah.
So could you describe why the deflections are in the same directions, but make it so that they understand it?
Okay, I think because of the last cells that depolarized are close, like very close in localization, and the are localized next to the first that repolarize. Does it make sense? So because of the position of the last cells that repolarize and the first that depolarize.
Okay, but now if you were to think about it, right? If you think about a traditional electrophysiological recording here, okay? So if we were to look at...
Could it be because it doesn't reach its full,
So the question is, in a very simplistic way, so actually let me erase this. I don't want to give you any clues here. In a very simplistic way, Eslendi, you're giving me the actual book definition, But the question that I pose to all of you guys is, as Lendy's given us a directional aspect of dipole and repolarization, but does that really describe or explain why this is a depolarization event and this is a and this is a repolarization event? If this were a repolarization event, shouldn't it be like this? Right? So this is dipole, this is repole. So if they represent opposite events in a excitable cell, the question, the real question is, why are they both going upwards? Shouldn't this one be going downwards, or shouldn't they be in opposite directions?
Are we just watching the influx of ions?
You could say that for essence, Mark. Yes, you could. But the question is, how could you explain this? Like I said, there is a picture perfect way to explain it. And once you guys see this picture, you guys will understand it, because the whole idea, if you just recite what the book definition is, do you guys really understand why a recording electrode, again, remember this, if we were to do this, right? If I were to put a recording electrode right here, and if this were negative and this were positive, right? If we wanted to have this recording electrode actually go through a depolarizing event, what's happening here? Is the negative still here, or something making the inside now more what? Positive. Right? So this is due to this going from that picture to this picture, right? So the question is, and we're getting always an upward deflection, but the question of course is, how can this now represent a repolarization event dealing with ionic movement? And again, this is where it's always one of my favorite ones. The only reason it's my favorite one is when I first started teaching. So first of all, I learned about this in my cardiovascular phys class at Davis, okay? And so it was always one of the best diagrams my cardiovascular phys professor ever explained to a group of students, because I got it. It was really cool. And so of course I had to include this. So this question was in my first class that I ever taught at Citrus. And so back then, when you think about the infancy of the internet, my students would Google this question. They could never find the right answer. In fact, they would always come up with answers dealing with the position of the leads, because if you do an EKG, it's all about where you put the leads on the body, right? And so, of course, the funniest question is you guys would go to your cardiologist, because, you know, you guys work in the field, and the first answer they would give you is, oh, it's just you change the lead positions. But it doesn't matter. If you change the lead positions, you'd get this as well. They'd just be going the same direction. So it's not the lead position. If you put the leads backwards or forward, you can make both things either go up or, oh, hold on, guys. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It doesn't matter. But the best question I ever got, so this is, like I said, I don't want to rag on a fellow community college professor, but one of my students went to her former professor at another community college, and she asked her old professor, what's the answer to this? And the guy goes, oh, there's no answer to it. And of course, well, guess what? I'm giving this as an extra credit because there is an answer for it, okay? And so, yeah, that person did not impress me, by the way. But again, the explanation is really cool. So the whole idea is, if you guys are here on either Wednesday or Thursday, I want to spend 10 minutes going through this extra credit question, and whoever's present, you guys get extra credit for lecture, not for lab. Okay? So just FYI, everybody else can get extra credit, but they have to email me. But if you guys let me explain it to you, yes, you will get extra credit for free, all because Eslendi already sent me the correct answer with regards to the directionality of dipole and repolarization. But there's one additional step which will make this totally understandable. Yeah, Jalissa.
If we attend both days, is it double extra credit?
Oh, no. You only get it once. Sorry, I will explain it both days because some of you guys can only come on either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So, but if anything, okay. Nah, I won't do this because you guys should remember it. I was going to say, if you can explain it to the Thursday people, I'd give you extra credit. No, more extra credit. Okay. No, it's a really cool one. Like I said, it's basic understanding, and the only reason I'm so attached to this problem is when it comes to EKGs, right, as a diagnostic tool, because we can do all this stuff. Believe it or not, I did not know. Okay, first of all, if you notice in my notes, it's called an ECG. Do you want to know why it's referred to as an EKG in old school nomenclature?
Didn't have to do
German.
Thank you. Who said that? Cardio is German.
Yeah.
So EKG was, if you ever watched, if you want to call it, medical shows back in the 70s and 80s, like some of the old classic ones that I watched, never called ECG, always called EKG, because cardio is K in German for cardio. And the only reason this is an important point in my life, okay? And I don't know if you guys are into science fiction, but how many of you guys believe in the alternate or parallel universe analogy in all science fiction shows? So, here we are in this one existence, but could you imagine 1,000 different versions of you living in 999 parallel universes, and your life could be totally different in all of these parallel universes, right? It's one of those weird alternate time dimensions. And the only reason I bring this up is that one word probably cost me my first full-time position teaching. And if I would have known the root word of cardia, I may not be teaching at Citrus. I may be actually teaching at the Northern California, because I got that question during my interview and I had to jaw dropped open. I don't know. So whenever you say I don't know during an interview, is that usually the kiss of death? So I did not know the root word of cardio. So that probably cost me my first full-time teaching job at another community college. So like I said, by not knowing that, I'm at Citrus instead, which of course I would
Yes, that's a good thing for us.
So I would not change where I'm teaching, but it's one of those weird things. How different would my life be if I was teaching up in Northern California? And like I said, if you guys don't know who Bobby Goodman is, I don't know how my life would be different if I hadn't met Bobby in my academic career, because he's my, one of my best buddies here right now. So, but it's just one of those weird things. And like I said, I'll go through this extra credit question on Wednesday or Thursday. So yes, if you want extra credit, you have to be in attendance, because I will take roll on Wednesday and Thursday for it, okay? But to wrap it up, since we are pretty much running out of time here, it's really the last couple of pages. First of all, when it comes to the cardiac cycle, I already said this in the video, you don't have to know this step by step, but you do have to understand the terminology. And so when it comes to the terminology, make sure you can define end diastolic volume, make sure you can define isovolumetric ventricular contraction phase. Let's see. And then on the next page, so there's not a whole lot you guys need to know. And on the next page, you need to know the isovolumetric ventricular relaxation phase. Number 12, you have to know end systolic volume, which is number 10. So basically, what the cardiac cycle involves is just tying in the EKG to what's actually occurring in the heart. And in this case, to understand basically blood flow is, you don't have to tie it into every step of the EKG, but there's some definitive points in the cardiac cycle that are tied to terminology. And the most important ones really are end systolic and end diastolic volumes, even more so than the isovolumetric phases. The isovolumetric phases are just fun terminology related to heart mechanics that I like to test you guys on, but it's really about end diastolic volume as really the most important one that you guys should understand. And when we get into overall blood pressure and regulation, you'll understand why, okay? But as far as terminology, just know them. You're gonna see this on both your lecture exam and on your lab exam as well, because they're part of basic cardiovascular terminology, okay? And then finally, when it comes to abnormal heart sounds, murmurs due to turbulent blood flow, know the definition between stenotic and insufficient. And the only reason you define these as two different ones is because of the sound. You don't need to know the sound, okay? Because my ears aren't that good in detecting this, but as long as you know that one involves does not open completely, the one does not close completely, basically it's a leaky valve, okay? And depending upon whether it can't open or close, based upon the pressure, you get these different sounds, okay? But don't worry about the sounds, just know the definitions and you guys are good to go, okay? But to spend maybe 15 minutes to wrapping up this chapter, it's really about now linking the specific details to both of those APs right here. And so cardiac output, know the definition, heart rate and stroke volume. Now here's the heart rate. And in this case, parasympathetic, darn it, parasympathetic input, we've already talked about this. Again, innervates the SA node, AV node, but there's the key bullet point right there. Very little to the ventricles. That's why when it comes to stroke volume, your parasympathetic branch does not do a whole lot to it, okay? So that's why only affects heart rate. And when it comes to, here is the parasympathetic nervous system. Does the parasympathetic branch utilize acetylcholine or epinephrine?
ACH.
ACH. So this is where, if there's anything to know on this page, know everything about B. Because why? You're looking at potassium, you're looking at calcium, you're looking at sodium channels. And that's exactly how I laid it out in the initial picture with you guys. Basically, because of the linkage of these channels to basically muscarinic cholinergic receptors, this is the effect of ACH on the 3 key channels that affects phase 1 of those autorhythmic cells. And just by either increasing or decreasing parasympathetic input, you're going to affect the permeability of these 3 ion channels to cause that heart rate to slow down, right? Increased parasympathetic input, it slows down. Decreased parasympathetic input, your heart rate's going to go up. And so that's why that duality is something you guys should understand. Again, your SA node is under constant bombardment by the sympathetic and by the parasympathetic, and depending on which one is stronger at any given time actually determines your overall heart rate at that moment in time. Okay, and does that make sense to everybody, that it's literally a tug of war between the sympathetic and parasympathetic branch of the nervous system? Okay, and in this case it's minor effect. Again, this is why I said B is the most important one. A is important just from this point. Remember, parasympathetic affects heart rate, nothing really with stroke volume. Again, it does decrease atrial contractile strength by shortening that plateau phase. So it acts just like the sympathetic on the ventricles, but it's minor. In fact, one of the key things that I always go over in my anatomy class is a little bit of old school. But if I were to say this, the function of the atria is to pump blood into the ventricles. Is that something that sounds familiar to most of you guys?
Yes.
Yes. But do the atria really contribute a lot of blood into the ventricles when they contract?
No.
No, basically your ventricles fill passively. So if you think about the right side of the heart specifically, when your atria and your heart is relaxed, most of the blood flows directly from your vena cava through the right atrium right into the right ventricle, and then your right atrium does this, just a little bit of contractility to get that last little blood in. So most of ventricular filling occurs during what we call diastole, when the heart is basically at total rest, and the atria only contribute a little bit. So again, in this case, there is, again, sympathetic and parasympathetic input to the atria to control their strength of contraction, but compared to the ventricles, the atria really are like this all the time, very little. It's really the ventricles that get either really strong or really weak based upon the input to them, okay? But any questions on B before I proceed? Because this is the most important one, and it goes straight back to this picture right here, okay? So everybody good with, everybody good with part B? Okay, all right. To wrap it up then, sympathetic input, just the exact opposite. And so this is where my notes aren't as up to date, because the only thing I focus on are the funny and the T-type calcium channels, but there is a little bit of effect of potassium as well, but that's, believe it or not, newer information that hasn't made its way into my notes yet, okay? But remember, I test strictly off my notes, so if I refer to any kind of sympathetic effects on the heart rate, it will be strictly due to sodium, funny, and T-type calcium channel permeability changes, okay? So it's exactly the opposite of parasympathetic input. So are we good there? Okay, yeah. And then finally, when it comes to, this is where, this is a little bit out of place because I put it here instead of under the actual stroke volume, but for part D here, this is where we have the sympathetic input to affect both atria and ventricular contraction strength, but the main emphasis on ventricular, and that's where that T-type calcium channel comes into play with basically the plateau phase either being normal, either being lengthened, or being shortened. And so the key thing is, if you go back to what you guys remember from chapter 12 and skeletal muscle, does calcium elevation drive contractile strength?
Yeah.
Yeah, and your cardiac muscle cells are no different than skeletal, right? They're striated muscles, and the ability of your heart to contract stronger or weaker is all due to calcium influx, just like but in this case, the big difference, right, is when it comes to skeletal muscle, the calcium is released from the inside. When it comes to cardiac muscle, the calcium has to come from both the inside, but also is significant from the outside. And this is where those L-type calcium channels come into play, okay? And so that's really the two emphasis for heart rate and stroke volume as far as how the autonomic nervous system affects ion permeability, leading to either increases or decreases in heart rate or an increase or decrease in contractility. Okay, so any questions on these bullet points to reinforce what I started off the session with? All right. Oh, everybody good?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And then the last bit is where I asked you this question. So when it comes to stroke volume determinants, basically intrinsic means everything within the heart. Extrinsic means your nervous system affecting the heart. And when it comes to the main intrinsic control mechanism, this is where Frank Starling's law of the heart comes into play. And this is something we'll talk about when we get into chapter 14, because venous return is part of your blood vessels. So the whole idea is when it comes to the cardiac muscle, as follows. Again, if you read this definition, the heart normally pumps all the blood return to it. So if you increase venous return, and this is where that term end diastolic volume comes into play, you get increased stroke volume. And so here's the premise right now. When it comes to your heart at rest at this moment in time, how strong do you think it's contracting?
Not too strong.
Right? Because most of us have exercised, and if you do a really hard workout, can you feel your heart contracting a lot stronger, right? So right now at rest, are your cardiac sarcomeres at optimal muscle length or non-optimal muscle length?
Non-optimal?
Not optimal.
Non-optimal. And so this is the premise for your heart. Basically, your heart is designed to dramatically increase cardiac output when you need it, i.e. when you're under high metabolic stress. And the whole idea is, yes, right now, most of your blood is pooled in your venial system of your cardiovascular system. It's all in your veins because the rest of your cells don't need it. But when you start exercising, we have a dramatic shift in where the blood is. And so if we now increase venous return, venial return back to the heart, if we increase the amount of blood filling up that ventricle, and again, primarily, we always think the left ventricle. If we stretch the left ventricle chamber bigger, we're actually stretching those cardiac sarcomeres to optimal length. And if we stretch them longer, they can contract a lot stronger. And that's the premise for Frank Starling's law of the heart. And it will come full circle when we get into chapter 14 on Thursday. Like I said, chapter 13 is relatively short, can be covered in one day, and then 14 is a little bit longer one. But I think we can definitely cover 14 in 2 Zoom sessions to wrap up everything for exam number 2. But that's why it is important. And so, yes, how does this work? Resting is less than optimal, and all we do is we stretch it to a longer length. On the flip side, extrinsic control, that's where the sympathetic stimulation comes into play. And so that's why it's a little bit out of sync with the bullet point D here. Okay, it should be down here. But the whole idea is, yeah, if you increase sympathetic input to the heart, you can affect both heart rate, but now stroke volume. And it's all about just increasing calcium influx. So that's why it's always that reference to chapter 12 in skeletal muscle. Again, if you give your muscles more calcium, will they contract stronger?
Yes.
Yes. And your heart is no different than your skeletal muscles in that aspect, okay? And that takes care of pretty much the mechanics of the heart here. The rest of it just deals with terminology. So in this case, heart failure. And this is always one of my favorite ones because heart failure just refers to literally a damaged or weakened heart. But these are my favorite ones. Basically, backward failure versus forward failure. And both of these are caused basically when your heart just doesn't work as well. And so backward failure, blood dams up in the venial system because your heart can't fill up with enough of it, right? And then forward failure, your heart can't contract strong enough to push the blood forward. But it's just basic definitions. If you guys know them, this is where the simple terminology comes into play. And I think on the last page deals with just nourishment. And the only thing to think about, even though I won't ask you this question, do you guys remember all of the 4 main branches off your right and left coronary arteries, just for humorous reasons?
No.
You guys don't remember RPM and LAC? Just curious.
Right pulmonary mitral? No.
So the right coronary artery branches into the P and the M. You guys remember what the M stands for? Just out of curiosity.
Myocardium?
Marginal?
Marginal branch, yeah.
And P is posterior interventricular branch. And do you guys remember what the left one branches into?
Anterior.
Anterior interventricular.
Anterior coronary.
And what does the C stand for?
Circumflex.
Thank you, Gwendy. Circumflex. Good. You don't need to know that. I just wanted to know if you remembered it from anatomy or not. But anyway, in this case, the whole idea is, the neatest thing about this is that the coronary blood vessels basically open when the heart is in diastole. So systole means contraction, diastole means relaxation. And of course, as soon as the heart relaxes, it allows the arteries to basically open up and supply blood to the heart. So basically you feed the heart when it's in a relaxed state, and blood flow stops when it's contracting, or let's put it this way, maximum blood flow occurs when it's relaxed. Blood flow slows down when it's contracting because it's a counterforce. And the key thing to dilate your coronary blood vessels is going to be adenosine. So bottom line is, when ATP is broken down into ADP and a free phosphate, right? The ADP is really what causes these blood vessels to dilate, and they're going to dilate when you utilize more ATP. And when you utilize more ATP, that means basically your heart is contracting faster and stronger. So it should make total sense when blood flow either increases or decreases to the heart. And again, it's all linked to metabolism. Okay. But in this case, like I said, chapter 13, the emphasis is always going to be on literally these drawings right here. So I actually took the time to draw this one, at least just to show you the commonalities. And like I said, I thought I did draw the three of them up here and made it permanent, but I guess I didn't. But if you understand the ionic fluxes that are occurring during both the autorhythmic cells and the contractile cells, and the key thing now is the nervous system input to cause them to change or be altered, that's where you're going to be tested on. And again, it's going to go down to basically permeability, guys. Under what conditions will the permeability of these membranes change to, again, primarily calcium, sodium, and potassium? And again, as long as you guys understand that, you guys are good to go with regards to chapter 13, okay? So, and again, the only reason I think I picked this picture out is because PX, right, permeability to ion X here, okay? And again, as long as you understand the permeabilities, you guys are good to go. So, all right, with that in mind, any questions on chapter 13, other than maybe rewatching the videos multiple times to catch the emphasis again? But any questions? Go for it, Wendy.
So for this picture, the sodium channel is the same as the one sodium funny channel?
No, this is a different one, Florence. Yeah, this is a no-name sodium channel. So
just a regular one.
Regular sodium channel. No, they've not given this one any. Let's put it this way. It's probably given a specific name, but I'd have to go into the actual scientific paper. It has not trickled down into a physiology book yet. Okay. But yeah, but the sodium funny channels have actually, it was interesting. If you go back to how our understanding of physiological mechanisms has changed. If you go back to when I first started teaching, we knew about the T and the L-type calcium channels because, like I said, that was the first paper my PI made me read. But if you go back to 1997, in any college level physiology book, there is no reference to sodium funny channels. Sodium funny channels were discovered around 2005, I think. That's when I first remember cracking open the new book. Oh, they found something new. Had to throw it into my notes because I just like the word funny. You know, they actually call this sodium channel a funny sodium channel. So, but yeah, as far as this one goes on this picture, Florence, I don't know if they call it something specific. It has not trickled down into a mainstream phys book, at least as of now. Okay.
So L-type calcium involves in both action. I mean the action potential, and then the funny channel only happens in the pacemaker activity, and also the tiny one is only in the pacemaker activity. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. Correct. Yep.
Yes, thank you.
All right. All right, guys. Anything else to wrap up to today's session then? Any lingering questions?
Nope.
Nope. Tiffany says no. I like that.
Until tomorrow.
Until tomorrow, yeah, for you guys who double dip every week.
I need to watch the videos like more.
Yeah, I think 13, definitely 13, watch it again. And if you think about what we covered tonight, it's just repeating the same thing. The big emphasis is the neural input to both the autorhythmic cells. And really, when we talk autorhythmic cells, we're talking SA node. So when we increase, sympathetic or parasympathetic input or decrease either or to the SA node, it's going to alter heart rate. And when the heart rate goes up or down, the key point there is how are the permeabilities of these ions changing? That's the emphasis there. For the contractile cells, it's that plateau phase. And even though they will affect all 4 chambers of the heart, the main emphasis when we talk cardiac output, it's left ventricle. How strong is that left ventricle contracting, or how weak is it contracting to pump all that blood or the blood to the rest of the body? That's really
when you say that, it's okay. Okay, that sounds simple enough. But then when you just start talking, I'm going to watch the videos 100 more times.
Yeah, there again, this is where, like I said, the details are really basic, but it all goes back to ion permeability, Lenine. That's all we're doing here. If we want to, like I said, for this picture that you see here, all we're doing is we're either increasing calcium going into the cell or decreasing it. And the nice thing about the contractile cells, it's only controlled by sympathetic input. So if we increase sympathetic input, more calcium, stronger contraction. If we decrease sympathetic input, less calcium and weaker contraction.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Yeah, that's all it is. Very basic. So, yeah. All
I have a question, Kondo.
Yeah, go for it, Zach.
So for the students who are in CRN 32660, do they have to do physio? Do they have to do anything else besides physio exercise 3 and exercise 11 activity 4?
I don't think whatever I assigned, I don't remember. I have to go back to my announcements, Zach.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to know, like, is everything that you just assigned to us on announcements, those are the only things that we have to do on physio.
Yep, that's the only thing you have to do for PhysioX. Yeah, so whatever I put on the announcements, those are the assignments. So since I have it right here, yeah, so for PhysioX 11, basically, yeah, everybody's doing just activity 4 because that's the most important one there. The other ones are not as important. I don't care about them, that's why. And then for PhysioX 2, everybody's just doing activity 3. And then I have not assigned, I have not assigned 5 or 6 yet because we just started it today. So I'll probably put the assignments for 5 and 6 up today or tomorrow for PhysioX 5 and 6 because they're directly related to cardiovascular phys, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll have the appropriate quizzes up there for you guys to type in your time frames for taking it. Okay. All right then, with that in mind, any questions to end today's session? If there's anything lingering right now.
Sure.
Everybody good?
You said the main emphasis on chapter 13 is understanding the ion permeability change, right?
Oh yeah, that's the most important thing there, Joan. Again, how is the permeability of these ions changing to either increase or decrease heart rate or increase or decrease stroke volume? Mm-hmm. That is the you broke up, Joan.
The first picture was the heart rate, right?
Yeah, so this picture right here, so this one is the heart rate one.
Yeah. And then the second one is the stroke volume.
This one's the stroke volume,
which is the
contractile.
The venule, right?
No, so we're looking at the contractile cells, which make up pretty much the entire heart, okay? So because the heart serves as a pump, the 99% of all of your cardiac muscle cells are contractile cells. And when these contractile cells contract, right, they generate force to pump blood out of the heart. And by definition, that's stroke volume. So the amount of blood leaving the left ventricle is called the stroke volume. And you can increase or decrease the stroke volume by the strength of the contraction. Either it's really strong, increased stroke volume, or it's really weak. And the key thing is the ventricles will contract either strongly or weakly based upon calcium influx. So the main effect of the nervous system on those cells is either to increase calcium influx or decrease calcium influx to make sure that the heart contracts stronger when you need it to, or contracts weaker when you don't need it to. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, cool. I think I get it now. Thank you.
You are welcome. All right, guys. Anything else?
Arlo, you did mention that this picture that we're looking at right now is the stroke.
Stroke volume, yeah. So basically, this is the contractile action potential, and the plateau phase of this contractile action potential actually determines the stroke volume, how much blood is ejected out of the heart every time it contracts. And so the autorhythmic cells determine heart rate, the contractile cells determine stroke volume. And again, so these cells basically contribute to, if we go back to this picture right here, because this is the synopsis, right? So here's cardiac output, but the heart rate here is determined by those autorhythmic cells, and really SA node is what we're talking about. And then the stroke volume is dealing with those contractile cells, but specifically the contractile cells that make up the ventricles of the heart. And in both cases, both of these will either be, so in this case, stroke volume is affected only by sympathetic activity, but heart rate can be controlled by both parasympathetic as well as sympathetic input. It can be altered by both.
Got it.
Okay, all right. All right, guys, like I said, when you go over chapter 14, I would have to say the only reason 14 is lengthy is because of a lot of old anatomy, okay, which is pertinent in some aspects. But when it comes really to the TPR side of it, which is the blood vessel side, it's really about just understanding vasoconstriction, or what's controlling the vasoconstricted and vasodilated state of your blood vessels, and in this case, primarily your arteries, okay?
And TPR, you mean total peripheral resistance, right?
Total peripheral resistance, yeah, TPR, yeah.
Oh, it's right there. Yeah, got it.
So it's easier to say TPR than saying total peripheral resistance 20 times in a row. So, yeah, TPR. It's always affectionately called TPR, so, all right. All right.
Wait, Arno, one more time. Sorry. You said parasympathetic. It's either
it only affects heart rate.
Okay, so it's an increase?
Yeah, so no, parasympathetic, well, an increase in parasympathetic input will decrease heart rate. So one of the things that I will do probably over the next couple of days is I sometimes I do this in the video. I can't remember if I do this, but if we look at this side, if we basically increase this, decrease this, we will cause a decrease here, a decrease here, a decrease here, and a decrease here, okay? So this is the nervous system input. On the flip side, if we now decrease parasympathetic, oh, let me change color. If we decrease parasympathetic and increase, right? These are always going to be an opposite to one another, right? So if we decrease parasympathetic and increase sympathetic, we will increase heart rate, increase stroke volume, increase cardiac output to increase mean arterial pressure. So that's how the nervous system is controlling overall cardiac output, and the relationship between cardiac output and blood pressure is directly related. If we increase cardiac output, we will increase blood pressure. And really what it comes down to is your understanding of, oh, how is the parasympathetic and sympathetic branches of your nervous system changing these two, which will change this, which will change this, okay?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm trying to get it.
Yeah, and so just remember this, okay, Tiffany, is remember if there's anything to relate this on a normal, sympathetic is when you're basically, sympathetic activity is increasing when you're exercised or under stress, but let's use exercise because that's the normal one. And parasympathetic activity is going to increase when you're going to bed, okay? And there's going to be multiple states in between those two extremes, okay? But the whole idea is when it comes down to it, you'll never have both parasympathetic and sympathetic increasing together or decreasing together. They always work in opposition to one another. And when they go either up or down, right? The question is, when this goes up, this will come down, but based upon the input from your autonomic nervous system, how are these two effects going to affect heart rate and stroke volume? These two will now affect cardiac output, and cardiac output is going to affect blood pressure. And so if we increase this and decrease this, basically heart rate's going to go down, stroke volume is going to go down. If these two parameters go down, cardiac output's going to go down, and mean arterial pressure is going to go down. And the way you think about this is when you're going to bed tonight. So all of this stuff will happen in the black arrows when you're going to bed tonight. On the flip side, you wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to go for a 5-mile run in the morning. Well, when you start running, the blue lines are going to come into effect. You're going to get an increase in sympathetic, decrease in parasympathetic, heart rate and stroke volume are going to go up, cardiac output's going to go up, and your blood pressure will go up. All because of the nervous system input to the heart.
Okay, got it.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, guys, anything else for tonight before we tackle chapter 14 in the next 2 days? Like I said, it's the lengthy one, but any lingering questions before I say night-night? And work on some of your stuff.
What kind of whiskey will you have tonight, Arnold?
Oh, golly, which one? Which one should I have? I don't know yet. I actually broke down and, okay. You guys know what my favorite whiskey is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Pendleton, right? So if you go old school Pendleton came in these nice etched bottles, right? And I used to have like a bunch of them. But about 3 years ago, I guess they had to cut down on the cost, so they went to paper labels. So the paper labels don't look as nice as the etched bottles. So I had to. You can't find the etched bottles anymore, but there was this one place that I still know had like 2 bottles left. And so last Friday I actually paid $10 more for this bottle of whiskey just because of the bottle. And so this bottle I'm never going to crack open because it's in the original bottle. And so this is what I'm going to, either my son is going to inherit it, or I'm going to tell my son, when you cremate me, cremate this bottle of whiskey with me so I can go into heaven with my bottle of whiskey when they cremate me. So
that's a good idea. That's good.
So technically you just kind of like pay for the fancy bottle.
I literally paid $10 more for the fancy bottle just to have one, because I've thrown away I actually have one of them still left over, but all the other ones, I don't need these. Just recycle them. And I go, oh no, they changed to the paper labels. I should have kept all my old bottles because they look so beautiful. So collector's items, but anyway. No, I'll probably
just fill it up with water, Arnold. Drink it, fill it up with water.
Let's see. I'll probably have, what will I have tonight? I'll probably have I haven't had Buchanan's in a while. I'll have my Buchanan's tonight. So.
Oh, that's spicy.
Yeah.
Buchanan's.
It's the deluxe. It's the 18-year-old. So.
That's nice.
That's a good one. I like that one. That actually came on recommendation from a student. So.
It's a little smoky up. Those are good.
Yeah, it's good. Very good. Yeah. So I'll probably have that tonight at the end of my night while I put up your practice chemistry problems, so you guys can practice more. But anyway, all right, guys, anything else for the evening? Are you guys good?
Are you posting more mathematic problems?
Yeah, I'm gonna basically the part A that I had to delete, Ariam, I'm putting those back up, but just the chemistry ones, not the BMR ones, because those ones are still saved on Canvas. It's just I have to not reformat them. I just have to put them into a new titled document. And so if you already did part A, it's coming back, but it's not coming back as all 11 problems. It's just, I'm just reposting the chemistry problems from part A. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So everybody good then? All right, then I'll see you guys either tomorrow at 11:30 or Wednesday at 5:30 again, okay? So,
Thank you.
If you guys need to, if you guys really just want to practice some problems, just let me know. And I'm not going to type up anything formally, but if you guys want to meet up like at, probably not tomorrow at 11, but if you guys want to meet up on Wednesday at 5 o'clock or maybe Thursday at 11, just 30 minutes before class, if you want to meet up, and I'll just put stuff on my whiteboard for you guys to practice. So it won't be anything official, but those problems I can just put up directly, just scratch numbers up there. And if you guys want to practice them together, we can practice them together if you want to, okay? Just let me know if you want.
Thank you. Can I let you know right now that yes, for Wednesday? Okay, then it's your responsibility to email me like on Wednesday morning, Joan, to remind me. You're going to be my secretary then, okay? Okay. So sounds good. Yeah, so just email me Wednesday sometime saying, Arnold, can we hook up at 5 o'clock to do more chem problems? And yes, no problem. Okay. Cool. Gotcha. Right. Thank you. You are welcome. Okay, guys, have a good evening then.
Thank you,
Professor.
Arnold. Thank you.
Oh, wait, Kondo, I have one last question actually.
Okay, go for it, Zach.
For the survey, like every time we finish like a lab activity, and if there's like a due date, and if we're like a couple days past the due date, does that mean like we lose points for that?
Technically, yes, for the extra credit, yeah, or even for the participation. So try to do the participation and the PhysioXs when they're due. So I opened up all the participation quizzes, I think, through last Friday, but I can open them back up if you guys want to. Just make sure you guys, I mean, they're meant to be just done so you're reminded of like some of the key terms that you should know for any of the lab exams. And the PhysioXs are just to make sure that you guys don't wait until the last minute to do all of them, which is good because I've been getting PhysioXs regularly from you guys, just so I can put them into my official spreadsheet. But yeah, if something comes up, just email me, Zach, and I can reopen them if there's a problem, okay?
Okay, so it's like if it's past the deadline, then we can just ask you to
reopen it, and I can extend the deadline by another week. Yeah, it's not a problem.
Oh, okay, because I did it, but I just didn't return it like on Canvas. Like I gave it to you like through email.
Oh yeah, okay. That's the main thing that matters to me. As long as you emailed me the document, then I know you've done it. If you didn't actually type in the time on the actual quiz, don't worry about that, okay? Because I can always just add your number into the mixture and come up with, because I'm not going for an exact time. I'm coming up with a ballpark figure because coming this fall, the PhysioXs will be required by everybody for participation as well as for some extra credit. So I'm basically this fall I'm forcing everybody to do them all for not only extra credit, but also for part of their lab grade, because if online education occurs, I have to make everybody do the actual quote computerized lab experiments to make the class, if you want to call it, legitimate, okay?
I see. Okay.
Yeah, not a problem. As long as you send it to me, email, you're covered, Zach, okay? Okay. All right. I think that takes care of it. So I will see you guys tomorrow and or Wednesday then.
Wait, Arnold, sorry.
Okay.
Like last thing, sorry. I'm checking on the exam number 2 materials, and for under the chapter 14 blood pressure with image, is B201 practice MC question. I don't think number 3
let's see,
pops up. I only see 1 and 2, but number 3 says, which of the following statement concerning the blood clotting system is true?
Hold on, let me see. So what is this now?
It's under the exam number 2 material.
Okay, exam number 2 material.
And then the B201 practice MC questions.
Oh, okay, B2, so I actually have a practice one there, huh?
Yeah, but it seems like it's incomplete because I don't see number 3. Is it like a multiple choice?
Ooh, you know why? Okay, hold on. Let me re-download this one because let's see. With map is true to. Oh yeah, this was something that I put up last semester because I was typing up some questions. So yeah, number 3, there's nothing there, but there's basically 1 and 2 are complete. You mean? So can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was, I think one of the things that I did last fall, because that was my quote, real first online physiology class, is that I typed up a bunch of practice questions as the course was occurring. And so they asked me to
put up whatever I had at that time concerning exam number 2. And I think these were the only 2 that I had at that time. I think I have a couple more. So I'll probably either show it to you guys or post them if I can format it, because it's just here. Let's put it this way. What I have right now is basically this. Let's see, where is it? So again, can you guys see this? So these are all the questions that I made up last semester for the entire class. And so this is all, I think I showed you some of this for midterm number 1 stuff, but
can't really see it.
I can't see anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about, can you see it now?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right, so this is the stuff that I showed you guys, I think, for part of it for exam number 1. But if you notice, here's some questions for muscle contraction. I think we went over some of these. Then I have some notes from emails. But did I show you these questions?
No. Oh,
Yeah.
it's that one right there. Which of the following statement concerning blood is true? I think that's what you kind of, it stopped there, and then like the rest of it did pop up.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the rest of it then, Tiffany.
Oh, okay.
So then
Are you
again-
going to like post it or re-upload it?
Well, I had no intention of posting this because it's just all of a compilation for the entire class. So I'm not editing this. This is just what is it? An ongoing document. So this is something that I could post, but I'm not going to edit it. So it's going to cover everything from exam number 1 through exam number 3, I think, because I think where I left off. So that's some lab stuff. This is lab stuff.
So is this like, I see.
This is just a running document from fall where I just posted questions for every exam. And so like, you know, for something like this one, remember I told you guys when it comes to those fill in the blank sequential problems. So, you know, here's the pathway, but what I did was I converted all of these steps into multiple choice choices. And so this was a way for you guys to practice your pathways if you wanted to. So. I mean, I could post this, but it's not going to be, I'm not going to take the time to edit it. Let's put it that way. So guys,
can you post it anyways?
I can post it, yeah.
So we can practice.
Thank you.
So going back to some of the vision stuff here, if you notice, right? So.
Wait, when did you show these questions, Kondo?
What?
When did you show these questions?
I think like for you guys, see, this is the stuff I did for you guys this semester, I think, right?
Yeah, you did.
Right.
Before the exam for number 1.
Yeah. So this is where it's just a running document that's totally not formatted. It's just everything is just, you know, this is what during the Zoom meetings, if I come up with something that I think will help you guys, it's just a rolling document. So this was to help you guys practice on true and false statements, right? So everything in red is the true statement. Everything in black is all the false statements, I think, right?
Oh, I see what you did. So basically you put it on your notes. So that way when you like, for the next semester, you can actually have some idea of, okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So like, oh, and there's my, see, I use it for everything, including the Zoomers versus non-Zoomer statistics. So this is the actual anatomy. I think this was the anatomy results for this year, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, look at my.
Wow, non-Zoomers.
Yeah. So yeah, this is 2 to 1 is not good, you know. So, but anyway, but yeah, like I said, if you guys want some of this stuff, I can post it. It's just going to be, it will just be titled "Review Questions for the Entire Course" or "Review Information for the Entire Course." Okay. So if you guys want it, I'll edit it a little bit, but I'm just going to take out some of my like statistics. And like I said, there is one funny thing. I think I showed this to some of my other students, but this was one of my students who emailed me. So it just to reinforce, I love it when she said this, I seriously don't think anyone can draw the skeletal muscle contraction or RAS as good as I can. This was what makes me happy. So, but yeah, I can delete some of this other personal stuff and post it as a, basically, like I said, overall review document for the class. Okay. And then you guys.
All right, Arnold, thank you.
Welcome. All right. I think that's it then. But I'm going to, again, that's going to be low priority list. The first thing I'm going to do is get those extra chemistry problems up tonight before I go to bed. But anything else for the evening, guys?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, Lundy says nope. Okay, guys, and I'll see you either tomorrow or Wednesday night then, okay?
All right.
Okay. All right. Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.